Hello, and welcome to Not Just Books, the Williamson County Public Library's monthly television show about what is happening at your library and your local community. I'm Dolores Greenwald, and I'm the director of the library, and thank you for joining us today. And we are in for a treat. We have two local writers here that will talk about the writing process and author opportunities here in Williamson County. One is Bill Peach. He is a former retailer here in Franklin, and also Bryan Lane, who is a UT employee but has published a book on Brigadier General John Adams. So if you're interested in the writing process and writing opportunities, stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. I am pleased to have with me today Bill Peach, who is a local author and originally from Boston, but we can't hold that against him because he's been in Franklin here for a long time. And we're going to talk with Bill about what's going on with the local authors scene. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for letting me be part of this.
How long have you been in Franklin? I know it's been a long time.
In Franklin, I've been in Williamson County for 81 years.
No.
I have been in Franklin full time since graduating from high school. Now, when you said I was from Boston, that may need some explanation.
Okay.
If you know where Leaper's Fork is, and you keep going, there's a little country area that's Boston, Tennessee. And I was raised on the farm next to the store, the church, and the school. Hence the title of my book, The South Side of Boston.
Ah, interesting. I did not know that.
And the accent sort of gives me away. I don't, but it's interesting. My original ancestors landed in America at Marblehead, Massachusetts.
Marblehead.
Which is fairly close to Boston.
It's close to Boston. Well, now you were talking about a previous book. How many books have you written?
6.
6. And what is your latest one?
It's sort of biographical. It's called Main Street Philosopher. I was continually employed on Main Street for 52 years, through high school, college, military. Came home when I had to leave and worked. But in several of my blogs, in my blurbs, people have referred to me as the philosopher of Main Street. And I decided to capitalize on that and sort of, accept that image. Now, it's mostly in jest because I don't really qualify as a philosopher, but I do have an opinion on everything, none of which I want to do this morning.
And you've been in colleges or universities for quite a long time, taking a class here and a class there. So what's your recent one?
The last 2 I have done at Columbia State, and I'm so impressed with the presence of a campus here.
It's
and
very
I
nice.
Appreciate Charles Sargent for having pushed that idea, but I've been very impressed with the rigor of the instruction. Both my classes have been taught by people with doctorates, and it has been, I feel like, the equivalent of anything I've done anywhere else.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, let's talk about local authors and what's going on with them. I knew you guys were represented at Dickens of Christmas.
We were.
So tell me about the author circle.
Okay, this is sort of a rebirth from years ago when we had the Council for the Written Word. We have a Facebook page and actually have 432 members.
That's excellent.
And of those, approximately 180 have participated in some local event, either at the library or a downtown Franklin event, Southern Festival with our tent. But it is primarily networking. Also, when we were at Dickens, we met a lot of aspiring writers, and this is something we feel like is important. In fact, we had at one of our Friday night art scene signings, we had a 15-year-old sophomore who has published a book.
Oh, wow.
Who had not done a signing other than in a library. And he sat with us one night at the art scene. And he was the first one of us to sell a book. And he was so excited. But this is sort of what makes it.
That's excellent.
I tell people, students, every once in a while I would do a career day. And one of the things I tell the students, whatever you do, don't go home and tell your mama that based on what I said today, you want to be a writer. Because first of all, they will kick you out of the family will, and then they'll come looking for me. But writing is what separates us from the lower animals and builds our culture, and don't ever give it up.
That's very good advice. Very good advice. We need to bring him to the library and let him do a book signing. What are some of the other things that the Middle Tennessee Author Circle does?
We do have a booth at the Southern Festival. We do all three of the downtown Franklin events, which I helped start and create. But we do the Friday night art scene, and that the written word is our art form that we like to promote.
And that's, for people that don't know, that's the first Friday of every month.
And it's
the art crawl, and the authors are usually at Merity's, right?
Yeah, there may be some other places. The businesses, the offices, and the restaurants are very nice to let, particularly painters, craftsmen. In fact, we shared Merity's with a lady who makes jewelry. And that was nice. But it's not always the same people. Just I'm there and whoever else shows up. Usually we have anywhere from nobody but me to, I think one time we had 12, which was exciting.
Well, that's a very popular event, from what I understand.
It is. It has grown.
Come through quite a few people come every month, the first Friday.
And we have the trolleys running, and I think we have maybe the factory and Carter's Court participating, as well as downtown Franklin. This is a great town to live in. It is. We're pretty artsy.
I was going to say, it's a very creative town.
It is.
And a lot of writers, a lot of painters. So it's a very creative area. Lots of music. And
Yeah.
what's your favorite part of living in Franklin?
It's interesting. I have just downsized, and I live within 4 miles of all three of my daughters.
That's nice.
And that's nice. But, of course, I was in Franklin when everybody knew each other. It's
When it was really a small town?
and we were part of Old Franklin. Now, I avoid the phrase Old Franklin people, because that carries a different connotative message. But there is a divide in the people who, as we say, are not from around here.
Do you see it improving as more new people come in?
Evolving, because I was fortunate to be president of the Downtown Franklin Association the first 2 years of Streetscape. And it was the kind of thing that the Old Franklin residents were a little bit concerned about, because they said they liked things like they used to be. And what we did was we ripped off the plastic and the aluminum, and we made it look as much like used to be as you can. Now, used to be is a dirt street and a plank sidewalk and no electricity. So,
That's true.
you know,
That's
used to
true.
be is not within my job skills.
It's all about perspective.
It is. But it's, I saw on Facebook that it was, Williamson County was one of the snobbiest, I think, in the nation. But if you've lived here, that's not the case. We are a welcoming. I have joked in one of my books, one of the things about Southern people is they would give you their last morsel of food, but if you broke into their smokehouse, they would shoot you in a minute. You know, it's a strange,
That's true.
strange mentality, but it is warm and welcoming.
Let me ask you this: what do you think about the Janice Keck Awards? They're coming up. We have recognized, the library's recognized several authors. This is our second time to do it. Tell us a little bit about what you think the impact has been.
All right, first of all, I appreciate the fact that it does honor Janice, who was beloved by anybody in the literary community. And secondly,
My predecessor, she was director at the library for many years.
and I appreciate how you have filled the void that she left, and you have carried this, you know, her tradition forward. As far as the competition, my first concern when we started was, would we get enough submissions? Because the drafting of a manuscript is not an easy process. And it seemed to me it would sort of be coincidental, you know. Do you have a work in progress? Because a lot of times when I have checked to see how long it took me to write a book, of course the standing joke is it took me 58 years to write my first one, you know. But, you know, it's can be a year to year and a half project if you, I know people have been working on a book for a long time. But I like the fact that we have the categories, the genre that we do. When you think fiction, nonfiction, children's, and poetry, it pretty much covers the basic and reaches out to a broad spectrum of artists. And I thought it was interesting having twins. So we sort of had 5 winners instead of 4. I thought that was great. But it sort of reaches out to aspiring writers who've never been published and people who already have a book and have one in progress. Also, it is a financial award in that it costs, even if you self-publish a book.
Yeah, we do. The library does help contribute to publishing of what I think it's 10 copies of their book.
Well,
and started an account with them. And
even my last book, the editing and the publishing and the legal work to get it up and running was about $2,200 out of pocket. And it takes a few books sales to recover that. And this, you know, might be an opportunity for somebody who wouldn't attempt it otherwise.
well, you're emceeing the awards event for us at the library, and you emceed the first one.
I did.
And we appreciate that, and I do like the connection that you knew Janice so well and for so long. I think that's a good way to continue the program.
I have a special place in my heart for librarians. I've kidded people. I spent 24 years on the 2 school boards, but I have a daughter who's a librarian in the Franklin Special School District and one in the county system, who, by the way, was just recognized as the Teacher of the Year at her school. So anybody who is a custodian and caretaker of books and the written word, I have a special place for. And of course, I felt that for Janice, and I've come to appreciate you in the same,
Well, thank
same
you.
way.
Thank you. And thanks for coming today. I appreciate it. And will you come back again? Because we've got much more to talk about.
Yeah, I'm close. I'm in the area all the time. You can find me at Meredith's, maybe,
Well, thanks a lot for
Oh,
coming
it's
today.
been delightful, and I thank you for doing this.
And we'll be right back. Welcome back. And we are very privileged to have today Bryan Lane. And he's got a very interesting story to tell about a book that he worked for many years on. And we are very happy that that we were able to help Bryan in a little part of this, putting it together. Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you
Nice
again.
to see you again, Dolores.
You've been on here before talking about our self-publishing, but some things have happened to you since then. So I've asked you to come back and talk about that. But kind of let's recap where we got started with this.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about your research on your book?
Sure. I guess it was more than 25 years ago. I decided to visit Franklin, Tennessee for the first time. I was living in Memphis then. And to prepare for that visit, I read a book called 5 Tragic Hours by Professor McDonough. And the story of John Adams really captivated me. And I wanted to learn more, so when I visited the Carter House in Franklin, I met a gentleman named Thomas Cartwright, and I asked Mr. Cartwright for information. And turns out there wasn't a lot of information about Confederate Brigadier General John Adams at that time, but what he had, he very graciously shared with me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, golly, maybe I need to write something about John Adams. And so all these many years later, here we are talking about it.
And you worked, you did part of your research and work at the library.
Yes, ma'am. Matter of fact, I'll start in Memphis, and I spent many, many hours at the Shelby County Library. And then when we moved to Middle Tennessee, and we moved here, frankly, because of John Adams. I came here and saw Franklin and fell in love with this area. And then I spent many hours in your wonderful library. As a matter of fact, after we're done with this taping, I'm going to your library today to research another subject.
Okay, we want to talk about that in a
Yes,
minute.
ma'am. Understand.
But, so, when we met, you were working on research. You were in our Special Collections Department. And had you submitted your book at that time, or were you going to? I can't remember.
I
think
had
maybe you
submitted unsolicited copy to the University of Tennessee Press. And their initial reaction was very positive, but then I didn't hear from them. Mm-hmm. And I had read on your website about a new outreach program that you had, which was for local authors. And so I called you, and we had a very pleasant conversation. And then we met in the special collections. I was at the table, and you and Lisa Harmon came in, and we met that day in your library.
And I was concerned that you were going to miss the sesquicentennial, and that you weren't going to hear anything officially from them. So I was kind of prompted at that point to say, well, let's publish it.
Yes, one of the things as someone who was not an author at that point, I'm not sure that I am one now, was I didn't realize how long the process would take. From the time you submit something to the time it gets approved and edited and so forth. And I was unprepared for that. And I certainly agreed with your idea, because at the time we met, Dolores, it was January of 2014, and we needed to get this out by November 30, 2014, which was the sesquicentennial of that battle.
And we made it.
We did.
We did.
We did.
And your book that we self-published was Where No Sorrows Come, The Life and Death of Confederate Brigadier General John Adams.
Yes.
And you had copies at Carnton and other areas locally, and it did get some attention.
Yes, ma'am. We sold a couple hundred copies of that self-published book.
And then what is phase two? What has happened since then?
Okay. Phase two was, frankly, I still would like to have the book published, is what I was thinking, rather than publishing it. And so I reached out to a group called the History Press, Arcadia, and filled out a form that they had and submitted it. I had to put reference names. I put your name on there and contact information. And to make a long story even longer, they voted, their board, and accepted my proposal for a book. And so it has been published by the History Press as Tennessee Hero, Confederate Brigadier General John Adams.
That's excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm very excited when I heard about that. You had a book signing at Barnes & Noble,
I did.
and so it's very exciting to be a part of that.
It is. To think that I'm now part of that group of authors that has been at that Barnes & Noble in Franklin was very exciting. Now, you know, I didn't draw as many people, I'm sure, as Charlie Daniels drew or Garrison Keillor, but I drew several, and I think that's the part of the whole process that I've enjoyed the most, whether it's researching or whether it's talking to people at book signings, is meeting people and talking to them, and they all like to share their stories. So they don't just come up and buy a book, they want to tell me why they're buying a book, and that's I find that interesting.
Okay, so now tell me what you're working on.
Well, my new project that I'm starting on is about a Union brigadier general. And he also lost his life during the Civil War. But he was actually a very well-known poet at the time of his death. And the people from the North and the South both really liked him. His views on the states' rights of the South appealed to the Southerners, and of course his dedication to the cause of the North endeared him to the Northern folks. And his poetry, one poem in particular, really, you still find it in books of poetry to this day.
A poet soldier. You don't hear about that
You
very
really
often.
don't. You know, the one thing I thought about John Adams that was really interesting was in the letter that his father-in-law wrote. When he was describing John Adams, the first thing he said about him was, he was fun. That's something else you don't normally hear about
No, you don't.
soldiers.
No,
And
you
now
don't.
with this gentleman that I'm now researching, yeah, you don't normally think of soldiers and poets, although there are, in World War I, certainly produced some great poets and so forth. But that's what this man was well known for at the time of his death.
And where did he die? Where was
He
he?
died at Chickamauga. Yes, the Confederates were pouring through the Union Center, which had been left open, and this brigadier general rode over with his troops to try to stop the onslaught, and he was shot down. And when the story goes that when the Confederates discovered him, they cared for his body. They buried him. They later, under a flag of truce, returned his body to the Union side. So,
Wow.
yeah, very, like General Adams, to me, a very interesting story and one that is not well known. And I think if I had a niche, that's what I'm kind of going for, to
That's
try to
what-
remember these people that really should be remembered.
Well, that's what sparks your interest, it seems to be.
Yes, ma'am. And that's what started with General Adams. This was a man who did some extraordinary things and really not remembered. And I thought, that's not right. And that's one thing that I felt I could do something about. And I did the best I could.
Now, do you think it'll take you as long to write this one as it did with Adams?
Miss Dolores, if it takes me that long, we won't be talking about that book because I'll be long dead. So, no, ma'am, I hope it doesn't take me that long.
Do you feel kind of like it's your second child? You're a little bit more, you know, a little bit more about what it's going to be like, having done it once before?
One of my favorite books is Watership Down. And my understanding is that Mr. Adams wrote that when he was older. And from that point, then he wrote other books as well. I'm no Richard Adams, but that's my hope, is that now that I have this perspective of age and loss and joy and life, maybe I can, bring that to my writing. That's my attempt anyway.
Well, I'm glad you are bringing attention to some of the lesser-known soldiers of the Civil War. And I can remember one time when I was in grad school, we were working on the Civil War, and I'm thinking, is there anything else to say? But there is, and you have found it.
One of the stories from one of the people at one of the book signings, this lady talked about how when she was in 7th grade, her history teacher, that she always knew when she walked into the classroom and the textbook was not on the desk, it was going to be a good day, because that meant that he was going to spend the hour just telling stories about these different people. And to me, history's more than just dates and facts and figures.
Stories.
It's the stories of the people and the lives they touched and so forth.
It brings it to life.
It does, yes, ma'am.
It does. Well, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
And please come back and let us know how the other book is going. I'm
Yes, ma'am,
very
I will.
excited that you are already working on another project. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
And we'll be right back.
When I lost my sight, the only thing I had was reading.
When you discover you have an impairment, it can change your life. So take a little time to find the resources that are going to help you restore what you've lost.
Whatever your needs are, 99.9% of them can be met by the NLS program.
There's all kinds of formats that you can choose from. You can choose from large print or braille or audio.
Just can't recommend it enough. It's a free service. It's amazing how much you can get.
It has expanded my horizon.
And everybody can read the way they want to read using this program.
For more information about the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, Library of Congress, visit loc.gov/thatallmayread or call 1-888-NLS-READ.
Thank you for joining us today on Not Just Books. And thank you to Bryan Lane, who wrote a terrific book on Brigadier General John Adams, and Main Street philosopher, as he is often called, Bill Peach, for coming in and talking about the local author events and opportunities. Follow us on social media at facebook.com/WCPLTN and on twitter.com/WCPLTN. And until next time, explore your world and read.